Good evening. If you do have a mobile phone, if you would like to put it on silent, please, thank you. A huge welcome back to Cara St with Guardians of Blood and Fire, search for the Celtic art. Cara focuses on the mysterious Fae, evidently our seed race, astonishingly ancient, but apparently still around in some form, if we know where to look. This knowledge is recent, according to Cara. Is it linked in some way to last August's eclipse? Let's find out. Please welcome Cara St.
Thank you, Rob. It's linked to so many things, and this will be a far-reaching lecture tonight. This lecture evolves. I first rolled this lecture out in Australia a year ago, July, and it's the most organic lecture I have because I'm always finding more things out. I'm always being given more information. I'm always understanding more, and you can't disconnect what I'm about to talk about from all of the other things that are going on in our lives. So before I launch into this particular incarnation of this lecture, there are a couple things I would like to talk about on this blowy evening. You tough northerners think it's no big deal. It's very blowy out there. First of all, there's a lot of stuff going on in the USA right now that has to do with the weather, quote unquote the weather. It has nothing to do with the weather, of course. One of the things that's most on my mind right now is the fires in Northern California. Is anybody aware of that? Are you guys cognizant of what's going on there? Much of Northern California looks like Hiroshima right now. And it's just been in the last 3 or 4 days, perhaps, that has happened. I have a lecture that I'm giving. I go every year to a place called Petaluma, which is just north of San Francisco, not too far from Santa Rosa. If you've been paying attention to that story, you know Santa Rosa's basically been flattened. These are fires that have left vehicles melted in the streets and trees intact. Okay? Now, today I saw a warning from the government to the citizenry in that area not to sift through the ashes. Don't touch the ashes, they say. Don't touch them. You see pictures of vehicles and you see molten metal coming off of what used to be a car. The houses are all gone, but basically a lot of trees are standing. It's just been a very non-organic kind of thing. And one of the things that's been demonstrated in these fires, by some of the trees which have been exploding and burning from the inside out and from the roots up, is what happens. And what I've been saying, and millions of us have been saying for 5 or 6 years about aluminum nanoparticles getting into the root systems of trees. Aluminum is an accelerant. Aluminum is an accelerant. And so for many years, since I wrote The Sun Thief, I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but when I wrote that, firemen in Northern California were saying that fires were burning in ways that they'd never seen before, that could not be handled, that could not be put out. And even when they thought the fire was put out, the tree was still burning underground. Under the ground at the root system, it was still burning. So this is what's been going on in Northern California. December 1st, I'm supposed to be at ION's Petaluma Earthrise to do a lecture. It's the lecture I did here in June. Reverse engineering the trance, let's go deeper. There are a couple things going on in Northern California that I'm going to add to that lecture. I'm also just decided, I've got the lecture, the next day I've got the workshop. I do a workshop called Sovereign Imagination Studio Workshop that goes along with the lecture. So I've decided to open the lecture. I've decided to make the lecture free. It's now free of charge, so that I can get everybody who can manage to make it up there to that lecture, which means I'm going to be running a fundraiser. If you keep in touch with me on Facebook, you'll see it. I'm trying to raise about £1,000 in the next month or so I can cover the cost, so I can get everybody there who needs to hear about this, right? 2 things going on. The U.S. government, the military, was running tests on directed energy weapons over the last few days in Northern California. And there is some suspicion that they got out of hand. There were either 60 or 90, does anybody know that figure? It's either 60 or 90 separate fires that were started within the course of 1 hour in like a horseshoe area. in Napa Valley, California. What are the odds, guys? What are the odds? Okay, that's not something that can just happen. It doesn't just happen. So there's that. There's one other thing that's going to be added to my social engineering lecture, which is the same lecture, and that is that dead center in the middle of that conflagration is what's known as the Emerald Triangle. The Emerald Triangle is where medicinal marijuana is grown. And within the next day or so, California was supposed to open up to recreational use and legalization of medicinal marijuana and all of that. I do not think that that is, I don't think that that's an accident. I think that that's part of what's going on, okay? And since I'm somebody who very much believes that this planet needs to be recovered in hemp, this makes me crazy mad. This makes me so angry. Anyway, they're after the Emerald Triangle, and I think they were using a weapon that got out of control. And I don't even know if the venue that I'm going to be on in December 1st is still standing or will be standing. The pictures I got this morning were from a friend of mine, the guy I stay with when I go there, showed clouds of fire and smoke coming over the mountain toward Petaluma, which is where the venue is. Anyway, so I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about the waters, because that will come as part of this, strangely enough. Have you been seeing the stories about the waters in the Caribbean and the waters in the Mississippi and the waters everywhere they're disappearing? Now, the one in the Mississippi didn't disappear concurrent with a hurricane, but the ones in the Caribbean did. It had nothing to do with that. I've talked to my friend Maria Wheatley about that, who's a master dowser and an expert in sacred water and all of those things. And she said to me that she felt that the water was receding. The water was actually taking itself back into the earth to be healed, to get away from what's being done to it. And I tend to think that she's right. I tend to think that she's right, because there's no other reason, nor is there any other place where this water could be going. Right? Okay. I wanted to talk about those things because they will figure in, believe it or not. Now, a couple of things I also want to say before we get started, and one of them is that people have, if you did come here thinking, if you came here knowing that this lecture was going to be about the Fae, I have to say this to you. People have very special feelings, very tender feelings about what they conceive these entities to be. They tend to mix them up with the elementals, which are mighty and real and wonderful, or some of the other things that you can find in that realm of our planet. But it would be just as much of an insult to the elementals as it is to the Fae to kind of mix all those things up and just call everything a fairy. That's not what I'm talking about. And I've been places where I've had this lecture, and people literally with tears in their eyes, because they've come in from miles and miles around to hear about the fairies at the bottom of their garden that they see. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a seed race. I'm talking about who we are, which I always talk about in my lectures. I always talk about who we are. I talk about who you are, and then I introduce myself. That's really important. It's really important because my basic premise from now till the day I die is that the human imagination is the translator between the morphogenic field, which is pure potential, and the material plane, meaning we make what we see. We are the creators. We are the creators. And we have an artificial intelligence who would like to be a creator as well, who cannot create, who's copying us, who's trying to live through us, to understand who we are, to mimic what we can do, those kinds of things. And so it's this mighty battle all the time between us and this artificial intelligence. And the reason that they cannot win is because of who we really are. And the reason that we've been buried in trauma, and we've been buried in full-scale dominance, and we've been buried in, distraction after distraction after distraction, and we've been assaulted physically, biologically, with vaccines and the food that we eat and all of those sorts of things is because job one for our adversaries to make us continue to make us forget who we are. Some of us in the field have decided to spend most of our time reminding us who we are, that we feel that that is the best way to go about reclaiming our own thoughts, reclaiming our planet, reclaiming our sovereignty, okay? So that's actually what I'm getting ready to talk about. So I may have actually, let's do this. Yeah, who you are. All right. Some of it I will read to you, but that's okay. All right. We are the descendants of and the inheritors of the skills of the original magicians. In fact, I call us the original magicians. It's for this reason that in the last 200 to 400 years or more, there's been an all-out war against you, realizing who you are and using your power. Okay. Why do I say 200 to 400 years? From about 1800, the social engineering millstone, the social engineering grinder really went into full bore with the educational system in about 1805, okay? So it's been about since 1800, but slightly before. Now, I have a friend that I'm doing a lot of work with right now who comes from 2 Illuminati bloodlines. His name is Shane the Ruiner. Is anybody familiar with Shane yet? Because if you're not, you need to be. He and I are going to be doing lectures on magic. They're called I Magician, You Magician, You Magician, okay? Not I Magician, all of us magician. Anyway, Shane comes from 2 Illuminati bloodlines, and his explanation to me and to a lot of other people in the last few months as to the last 200 to 400 years, and a couple of other things that I'm going to tell you right now, goes as follows. 200 to 400 years ago, the Draco, who had dominated this planet for a very, very, very long time, decided they weren't interested in being here anymore by and large. They just didn't want to be here anymore. And decided to, for the most part, to leave it to the human stewards who were their partners, okay? And they offered the human stewards who were their partners the option of telling the rest of us what had been going on and releasing all kinds of technology, you know? And the human stewards who had been their partners opted out, decided not to do that, decided to keep it all for themselves, okay? That is when social engineering started to beat us to death. It was at that point in time. The other question that he has answered, which is, I mean, the way he answered it makes all kinds of sense, but it's no less frightening. Have you ever asked the question, why are they doing all of this to us when they're also doing it to themselves? We've all asked that question, right? Why are they doing it? Yes, they are doing it to themselves, but the Draco, when they left, did not leave them a plan B, did not leave them an out, did not leave them anything. And so they have to continue to believe that transhumanism, they have no choice. They've got to continue to believe that transhumanism is the way forward because they don't have a choice. And that's where we sit. It's like they're driving a pickup truck, we're in the back, and they're headed for a tree. Okay? But they don't have any choice except to drive into the tree and try to pretend that that's what they meant all along. So those 2 answers fleshed out a lot of things for me. Okay. Who you are. You are a descendant of the original seed race of the Fae. Each one of you has enough power to turn the tide right now all by yourself if you only really know that that's true.